are now stepping into our session, Breakfast with the Pro. We have writer, stand-up comic, and television producer, and our keynote speaker from yesterday, Sean, back with us today. And here's our opportunity to get some on-the-spot coaching from our keynote speaker. Members, please welcome back Sean Conrad. Please feel free to participate. Just raise your hand and our tech chair will make sure that your question is heard. Let's remember to keep our questions just to 2 minutes so everyone has equal opportunity. What we will do is I will have Sean come. If Sean, you want to just address our audience, say how you want it to be run, what should we be doing? If you can explain a little bit for all our members here, that would be great, and then we'll get started.
Okay, I guess I don't know. I've never done this before, so I guess I leave it up to you guys. If you have specific questions about presentation or about material, I can try to do my best to answer those or approach anything that is relevant to what you're trying to accomplish. And you know, I will, like I said, I'll do my best to see if I have any insight, and I guess this will be the test.
That would be awesome. So this is really our chance. I think we can actually, I think yesterday somebody had asked this question, and I feel we have this question on our app also. It's about injecting humor. It's not easy to inject humor. Sometimes you want to make a serious point, but humor is not appropriate or appropriate. Sometimes you lead with the humor and then you want to make this serious point. How do you make this transition from making it a light subject to something that you really want to highlight as your focus or something very serious? If you can give us some examples, that would be awesome.
Well, I you know, I'm a stand-up comic, so the amount of serious I get to is very slim if I am doing my job correctly. But there are times when I do have serious things I want to say. I guess I would say the transition can be jarring to people. So you have to make them comfortable with where you know, where you're going. I think if you have a serious point to make, you probably, and you want to inject humor into it, you might start with a joke and then get to the meat of what you're going to say, and just stay on that track and be honest with people about it. And then when you're done, maybe make a joke at the end to lighten the moment. I think the only way to figure out how that's going to work for you is trying it out for other people. You know.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sean. I actually want to introduce Carolyn Morgan, who is going to be a moderator for this session. And she will either read off the questions from our chat for you or do the conversations that will help us all understand how to inject humor, how to make points, how not to be afraid of adding humor. Actually, I have really hard time creating a speech that is humorous. And for that reason, I actually did get into a pathways that Toastmasters offers is a humorous pathway. And I have to say, I have not really made any progress. I'm looking forward to making progress after this session. Kaylin Morgan, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Sean, I'm happy to be able to talk to you now.
Hey,
good job. Woohoo! I will say, people who know me in Toastmasters know that the table topics and the improvisational speech is my favorite part because I don't like preparing stuff. So I'm happy to jump in. It's great. And I love having discussions with people. So, and we'll just acknowledge that my chickens like this too. Everybody knows me here knows that too. So it's just always part of
discussions. Yeah.
It's just always part of me being on camera. Yeah. So So, I mean, do you have anything else do you talk about what we call triggering or serious topics when you're doing humor? Like, do you integrate those two things, or
I
you
think
keep your humor light?
I think that's a tricky question because
Yeah.
I think when when somebody goes to see a stand-up comedy show, they have certain expectations of how things are going to go. So if I stop in the middle of that and tell a truthful story about a difficult experience I had, I think that would be a little jarring to people. But that said, I think one of the points I try to, or not, I'm not trying to make points in my stand up, but one of the things I try to do is transform real life difficult experiences into things that are humorous, whether they be difficult encounters with another person at a store or difficult family stuff. It's like, how can I approach that and make it funny and light in some way? But that's a little bit different from saying I have a serious topic I want to broach.
Yeah.
How can I approach it with a joke? You know.
To put you on the spot, I was going to say not to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot.
Right.
Can you give us some example of something like that? Like how you would do that?
Yes. I guess I'm trying to think of a good example of that. Like I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and this is the caveat here is this is not going to be a great example, but I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and one of the things that strikes me, and I live in California, they live in New York, so I only see them a couple times a year, and there is a huge difference in each of them every time I see them in terms of just maturity and life experience, but also oftentimes, at least for now, in terms of size. And what that is representative of to me is the difficulty of being away from people and how people age and change over time. And that's not a fun, light subject, but the way I talk about it on stage is I make it very specific about one particular niece and how when she was born, she weighed this much. And then the next time I saw her, she weighed this much. And if this continues, by the time she reaches 30 years of age, she will have more gravitational force than the sun and will cause the earth to shift off its axis. So obviously the joke is not playing right now, but the point being, people change, things are different.
Yeah.
And there's a bittersweetness to that, and I try to make light of it.
That's great. Yeah, I'm hearing in that. So we are Toastmasters. Toastmasters use formulas.
Okay.
Toastmasters use tricks and tools. We like tricks and tools. We like, to know how can we plug this thing into that thing. But I'm going to say, like, what I'm hearing there is you're using like some specifics. We're talking about a very specific thing, how much she's grown, how she's in a combination with over exaggeration.
Yes.
Does that seem
exactly
right?
Exaggeration, not to make a pun, but exaggeration is huge. I think taking a specific idea and exaggerating it to its silliest outcome is a lot of fun for me, and I think sometimes a lot of fun for the audience, because of course what I'm saying is absurd. It wouldn't make sense, but there is an underlying crazy logic to it, where if she was 8 pounds when she was born and now she's 2 months old and she weighs 20 pounds, what's going to happen in 5 years? If you do the math, it works out to be
right.
a lot,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's
And I think exaggeration is obviously a great way to get at what's funny about something.
yeah. And it's quick because when we're talking, I mean, I'm just thinking specifically if we're doing a 5 to 7 minute speech, and we want to put some humor in it. I mean, I'm sure you as a stand-up can spend, 3 minutes building up to this, wonderful conclusion, humorous conclusion. But in a 5 to 7 minute speech, we can't do that. We don't have that luxury to have an effective speech. But I hear too, like, if you can do take some specifics, a few quick specifics, and then you can very easily blow it up.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Am I hearing that
absolutely.
correctly?
I think a joke like that, you're right. It could be 3 minutes, it could be 5, it could be 10.
Yeah.
But you could also get to a couple of punchlines about that in 30 seconds.
Right.
If you just take the grain of the idea and go X to Y to Z, then there you are with the payoff.
Right. Awesome. That's great. Someone's asking, do you have any suggestions on handling hecklers or people who disrupt your speeches?
Yeah, I do. And I'm not saying they're always going to work. But I think there's a million ways to handle hecklers. I think what I talked a little bit yesterday about planning, and I think that one thing you can do is try to come up with a specific response to someone who heckles you. And I'll give you an example of that, which I remember from before I ever started doing stand-up, when I was just a kid and I was obsessed with going to see other comics. And I saw a comic in New York City named Rick Dukeman, who I didn't know anything about him before I saw him. And I think he was funny. I don't really remember. If you ever see the movie Groundhog Day, I know he's in that movie. But somebody, interrupted him in the middle of his routine, and he had what I realized later. It seemed at the time like it was very in the moment, but I realized later he had probably done this 100 times before, and he just said, you're coming in here and you're thinking you're funny, and you're gonna go home. You're gonna go back to your office on Monday and say, you should have seen how funny I was compared to the stand-up comic. And then he just kind of went into this rant about how this was his job and nobody should come in here and try to, and it was amazing. And it got like a standing ovation from the audience because he shut this person down. So that was his version. What I like to do is just specifically address whatever the person is saying and see where it goes. I think you have to, in some way, either acknowledge it and know that you're capable of shutting it down, or just instantly shut it down. One or the other of those things. Because the worst thing you can do is sort of open up to the person, and then things go all over the place.
Right. Well, and it's also, one of the things you were saying yesterday in your keynote about when you came on and you were introduced and it was that awkward moment and you didn't acknowledge it and you just ignored it, but it was in the room.
Right.
Like with heckler, they're in the room.
Right. So in one way or another, you can't just pretend it's not happening.
Right. Right.
And the other thing I think to remember, and I forget this not as much as I used to, but sometimes I still forget it, is it can feel very oppositional. It can feel like the person is really going after you, and that can put you very much on the defensive. And the thing to always remember is that everybody else in the room is on your side, that you are not alone in that moment, even though it feels like you are alone in that moment.
Yeah. And that's really, that's something we say in Toastmasters a lot. It's a place to learn. Everyone's on your side.
Right.
Everyone's on your side. And so
absolutely,
you're there to learn, you're there to practice, you're there to bomb, you're there to mess up.
I mean, when I started doing stand-up, I had a stand-up teacher who I thought was great teacher. And one of the things he always said was bombing is just another word for learning. I mean, that's how you get better, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Looking at some other questions here. Again, do you have any humor formulas that you have found useful? How, and I would say, how do you write jokes?
Right.
How do you write your?
I think that's a very, at least for me, that's a tricky question. And I guess the only, I have a couple of things that aren't really formulas, but I don't know. Maybe they're helpful in some way. But one thing I always think about is taking two completely disparate ideas and finding a way to fit them together. Like, how do you combine two totally unrelated ideas and what makes them work together? And I'm going to dissect a joke in the lab, which means it won't be funny in the moment. But one of the jokes, and this is, it's going to sound like all I ever talk about is one particular topic, but I have a joke about politics where I say, you know, politics has been so crazy over the last few years, and I have learned something very specific, which is that it is fine to chant 4 more years at a political rally, but not at your niece's birthday party. And obviously that is taking the idea of politics versus the idea of your little niece, and those are completely unrelated, and yet when you put them together, there's something funny about the contrast between them. So that's one thing I try to focus on. Another is the idea of, if this is true, then what else is true? If I see a strange, I won't go into all the details, but I saw a billboard a while back where, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. It was a billboard of two men, and on the billboard it said, it was like an anti-smoking billboard, and it said, "I didn't come out just to die of lung cancer." And that felt like I was like, that doesn't make sense to me, that those two, like, the first part is so completely unrelated to the second part. Like, you could just have a billboard that said, "Don't smoke, it's bad for you." And so I then wrote a list of other billboards that I thought would be funny, where it was like this, I guess it's the same idea of, here's this idea and this idea, and they're completely unrelated to each other, but it sounds like you're saying that they are related to each other.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So same idea, just taking it one step further. If this is true, then what else is true?
Yeah. And there's a comment from Doris. It says, it seems witty people have more success in being humorous.
Well,
and I think that's
that makes sense. Sure. I think you know, there are some people who, for whatever reason, and I think there's a million theories about why that is, sort of developed their sense of humor earlier on. It was a way for me not to get beat up when I was a kid.
right. Well, I was going to ask you, have you gotten in trouble for some of your jokes and routines?
I don't know that I've ever really gotten in trouble, because once you say I'm a stand-up comic, you give yourself a lot of freedom, and you can sort of say stuff and people go, well, he's just kidding around,
right.
You know. But I do remember, I mean, especially when I was younger, I remember people saying there was a kid in my neighborhood who used to say, you know, your mouth is going to get you in trouble at some point. So far he's been wrong, I think, but we'll see.
Well, congratulations.
There's still plenty of time, you know.
Right. I mean, we just saw it.
Mm-hmm.
So All right, let's see, what else do we have? Oh, this is a good one. How do we discover our humor style?
I think that's a great question. And I I think the only way to discover your humor style is to try stuff out, whether on people in person or in Toastmasters situations. You just have to figure out what resonates for you.
Mm,
And I think one thing that can help is to go, what is it that makes me laugh? What do I like? And that's probably something in the area of what I would
yeah.
enjoy doing. There was a great comic who people always talk about finding your voice on stage, which I think is something in the area of an answer to this question. And this great comic who had done stand up for a long time said it takes comics 8 to 10 years to figure out their voice on stage. And that's for people who are doing it every single night and just focusing on that. So nobody else has that kind of time. But I think you can try different things and go, what resonates for me, and what, when I do it for people, actually works for them,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, so there's another question just came up. Do you adjust your set on the fly based on which type of humor the audience is laughing more at? Do you ever adjust your set, or are you
I know that that's a thing that some comics do. They come out and they go, oh, they're laughing at this joke, so I'm just going to tell all these jokes.
Mhm.
That is not something I have ever been prepared to do, possibly to my detriment, because it means that if an audience doesn't like what I'm doing, I'm just going to dig in harder to what I'm doing. But I feel like I am definitely there for the audience, but I'm also there for myself. I'm there because I have certain things I want to say. And
Nice. Oh,
I'm not going to, you know, I have a friend who talks about when he, early on in his stand-up career, he had a terrible set one night. He just bombed. He got up and he did all the jokes he liked, and he just bombed. And so he went home and he was like, what could I have done to do things better? And he realized he just sat there and he wrote a bunch of jokes about TV commercials and fast food and just the easiest, most relatable material. And after that, whenever he felt like things weren't going well, he would just shift into doing that material. And I
mm,
get why somebody would do that. It never interested me, you know.
yeah. Yeah, I like I guess I hadn't thought about that, which, as Toastmasters, we should. We are up there to convey something that we want to convey.
Right.
At the same time, you have to know your audience. That's one of our, of course, know your audience. But I hadn't thought of that as a stand-up comedian, like I guess I just was thinking you're there for the audience, but you're not. You have something you want to say. That's
Yeah, I don't know that I would say that it's like I have a mission and I want
right.
people to learn from what I'm saying.
It's not a TED
I
talk.
right. But I am doing this because I feel like I have insights I want to share with the audience, And
Yeah, yeah,
I think if I didn't feel that way, I don't know that I would be doing this,
yeah.
Um, so
That's great. Some people are asking if you have any books you would recommend, or do you watch
uh,
other comics?
yeah, I think as far as books, it's hard. It's hard to. I mean, I have a whole. In addition to doing stand up, I'm also a writer, and I have a
Mm,
whole collection of books about writing, and I'm obsessed with reading about writing and
mm,
reading about other people's ideas about writing. And I think that what I've come to realize is that the reason I'm obsessed with that is because I want somebody to tell me what's the right way to do it. I want somebody to give me the answer of this is how you do it. And the problem is there isn't an answer to that. It's different for everybody in terms of writing, but also in terms of stand up or telling jokes or being on stage. It's just a process you have to figure out for yourself, and it's sort of arduous and messy at times, and you make progress and then you take a couple steps back, and you just have to figure that stuff out. So I think that I literally, I mean, the one book I always think of in terms of stand up is The Comedy Bible by Judy Carter, which I definitely read when I was starting out. And it does have in it a lot of formulas about how to write jokes and where to get jokes from. And these are some good areas to brainstorm from. So, in that sense, maybe it would be useful. But it's that process of getting up on stage and figuring it out. Now, as far as watching other comics, before I ever did stand up myself, I spent a lot of time watching and analyzing what other comics were doing, whether live and in person or in television specials or whatever. And I would literally type out their sets and sort of highlight where the punchline was and how long it took to get to the punchline and how many words they used to get to the punchline and all those things. And I do think there is some value to watching comics, because it also gives you a lot of education on different styles of comedy and what different people have different ideas about how to make things funny. So sorry, you're on. Yeah.
That was me. Sorry. Do you think you still analyze yourself? Like when you're writing jokes, do you analyze your jokes in that same way that you used to analyze other comedians? Talking about how long does it take and what's like, do you consciously do that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, not right away. Like I have to sort of get up and do things and sort of figure out what's funny about them and what's going to work and what's not. But eventually I get to a stage that in writing, when I'm working on television stuff, I would call word crafting, where I go through and I literally word for word choose, and you can almost always take a word or two out of a sentence and get to the punchline faster. There's also that famous, you guys are Toastmasters, so I'm sure you've heard this, but it's a saying I love from Mark Twain, where he says, the difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between the lightning and the lightning bug. And so I'm always looking for the lightning instead of the lightning bug. What's the exact right word for the punchline or the punch word or the setup, and making it, because it's all about, I mean, in a similar way, it's all about communicating what's in here to you. And so the more clearly and specifically I can get my ideas across, the better my material is going to work.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue, because there are a few questions about cultural differences in an audience, and cultural and race, gender. So some people are asking, how do you handle different audiences if you have a diverse audience? Do you change anything, or do you just do your thing and see if it lands?
I somebody was asking about this yesterday, and I guess I feel like, I guess I have kind of the same answer. I think there are probably situations in which people change their material depending on who they're presenting to. But for me as a stand-up comic, I am sharing my life experience and my perspective on that. And I'm hoping that will resonate with people, that people will connect with that, no matter what their background or their race or their gender or their nationality is. And I know that's impossible to do that in every situation. But I feel like that's what I have to give. And so my hope is that some of the stuff I say will still resonate no matter what. And sometimes that doesn't happen, you know. But as far as adapting to who I'm performing for, the only time that I ever do that is if it's children, where I try not to try not to swear so much. You know? Not that I swear a lot anyway, but you know,
They probably like it.
they would. Oh, of course. It's very very
Uncle
exciting.
Sean!
Yeah, it's very exciting to hear adults swear. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I remember when I was a kid, it was like the most exciting thing was to hear an adult swear a word, right?
Definitely. Yeah. No, I like, one of the things I thought when you were saying that is like, well, your audience is there to see you, just like us, in our speeches, like they're here to see what we have to say, how we have to say it. And yeah, hopefully it lands.
And yeah, and I also think, like, I'm just trying to think of it from the other point of view of like, what if I did feel like, okay, these are people who are all over 6 feet tall, so let me try to adapt to what these people. So then I'm on stage and I'm in a position where I'm like, oh, you know what? Here's something you guys might like. And I just have no idea, because that's not what I have done for the last however many years, you know? So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with trying to adapt to your audience. I just think for me, it would be difficult to try to do that because, again, I know what I am trying to communicate, and I'm hoping that it will gratify them in some way, you know?
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. I want to see if anybody else, let me check. I'm going to ask, what breakfast should I have with the pro today?
I'm a huge fan of eggs and bacon.
All right.
Which some people say bacon and eggs. I just realized it's way easier to say bacon and eggs than we say eggs and bacon.
See, that's yeah. Anyway.
All about noticing the little things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but that's important. That's just like finding the right words. Like just saying eggs and bacon.
It's weird.
Puts us.
Yeah.
I want to say puts us, not puts us off, but it knocks your audience off kilter a little bit.
There's something strange about saying eggs and bacon instead of bacon and eggs, and noticing that and saying, after that, I'm going to have for lunch, I'm going to have a jelly and peanut butter sandwich. That's not how you say that, Right.
But it gets people's attention. It makes them, I think it makes them go, wait, there's something to listen to here. I don't know what it is.
For dinner, I'll have a burger cheese.
A burger cheese, yeah. Yeah.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
It's actually not a question, a request. If you remember, Sean, yesterday you shared that you ended up creating some parody or a song for students when you used to teach them. How did you come up with that idea, or what prompted that? And if you still remember, if you can share that with us.
Well, I mean, that was 30 years ago. So,
Understood.
But I will tell you that how that happened was, for people who didn't hear what I talked about yesterday, I was a junior high school science teacher for 6 years in New York City. At 114th Street, Frederick Douglass Boulevard in Harlem. And the most noticeable thing to my students right away was that I was white and I didn't belong in their neighborhood. And so one day I got into a conversation with one of my students about rap music. And this was the Beastie Boys were popular, but this was long before Eminem got into the business. and I talked about, because I had started listening to rap when I was in sixth grade in the late 70s, and I had always loved it, and they couldn't believe that. They thought, this is a white guy, he must love Leonard Skinner and Led Zeppelin, which I don't love Leonard Skinner, but I did love Zeppelin when I was in high school. But I was really into it. So anyway, this kid, I don't know how it escalated, but this kid challenged me to a rap battle over the course of the day. And so I accepted the challenge. And at 3 o'clock that day, I said to my students, she and I are gonna have ourselves a little bit of a rap battle if you guys want to stick around. So of course all of them stayed, like nobody wanted to miss that. And we did. We battled, and I knew how to write lyrics. I'm pretty good with words. So after I this is just a warning that I'm gonna end this with saying something that would make kids giggle if an adult says it. But I did, I finished, and there was 30 kids there, and it was just absolutely silent because they couldn't believe what this guy had just done. And then one of the kids just went, "Oh shit." And that was, I took that as a mark of respect. So it was just a silly thing, but it was a fun way to connect with the kids.
You won.
I think I did. Not necessarily because it was better, but because expectations were much lower for me, which is a good position to be in. I would love to go through life with everybody having very low expectations for me.
Rita, I see your hand is raised. Do you have a question for Sean?
I do. Sean, you mentioned earlier that you have to practice, you have to just be out there and do
Yeah.
it. Would there be value in not doing that and maybe just watching a workshop on how to do humor, or is the real value in test driving it yourself with your own material?
I think that you can only get so much out of reading and watching and thinking about the idea. I think the way to really learn how to do it is to do it. I mean, I was very, when I started, I was very afraid to do it, and I did. I read the book I mentioned earlier, and I watched a lot of comics on TV, and I think I learned a certain amount, but it wasn't until I started getting up and doing open mics every night for years that I really started to develop and get to the point where I felt comfortable in every situation and felt like I could actually do this. So I think there is some value to intellectualizing, but there's way more value to doing and being the thing you want to do and be.
That's great. Do you have a memorable set you did once, or a memorable night that you can tell us about?
Yeah, I guess I can. And of course, when you say memorable, the first thing my memory always goes to is what was the worst experience I ever had. But I don't want to talk about those kind of things. But in 2017, I decided I wanted to go on tour for a while, and I didn't have a booking agent or anything like that. I had been here in LA working on a TV show for almost a year, and just wanted to get out and do some performing and honestly, be out of LA. And so using Facebook and social media and emails, I booked myself a tour across the country, and I spent 2.5 months driving 12,000 miles from venue to venue and performing every night. And it was one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had, because I got to meet so many people and perform in so many different venues and really have fun. But the one night that really stood out to me, and I have no idea, that's one of the weird things about comedy, is that sometimes it goes well and sometimes it goes poorly, and you can figure out why. Like, these are the things that lined up correctly and these are the things that didn't quite work or whatever. This night was so amazing, and I honestly have no idea why that happened, but it was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in a small storefront improv theater, and it was an audience of about 100 people, and they had converted, like I said, they had converted this storefront into a theater, and they had bought a bunch of old church pews. There weren't actual seats, there were just church pews all the way through. And they had somebody local open for me and do 10 minutes. And then I just went up and did an hour. And it was just a magical night. Again, I couldn't tell you why things lined up that way, but it was so fun for me. And I think so fun for them. And it was one of those moments where I was like, yeah, I am doing the right thing with my life, at least for tonight. The stars align,
That's great. I love that feeling. Shamala has a question for us.
Yes.
Well, for you, not for me.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sean. I want to go back to your answer for the previous question when you said do and you get value out of it. And it actually resonates with all of us because Toastmasters believe in the same value. We are in the process of chartering a new club called as Ha 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 Club, primarily focusing on humorous club. So I want to understand what key elements that you would like us to consider into putting into this club so that it just goes off on a very good start. Can you elaborate more on what do you mean by don't you get a value out of it from humorous standpoint so that we can combine these two together?
Yeah, I think based on what you're saying, I think the thing that I would suggest would be the most helpful in a situation where you want people to get better at comedy, better at humor, is to give people the chance to do it in front of other people. I took 2 stand-up classes before I ever started doing stand-up. And I don't know that there's a tremendous amount of value in stand-up classes for doing stand-up because, like I said, until I got up on stage, it didn't really help me that much. But the first stand-up class I took was great because the teacher was great and had a lot of great insights into the craft. But after I took that class, I took another 8 years before I actually did stand-up. So that wasn't, it wasn't like getting me there, so to speak. The second class I took, I didn't feel like the teacher really helped me in any way. But the thing that we did every week in class was you get up for 5 minutes and do stand-up, and then you get feedback from the class and the teacher. And that was so helpful to me because it was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this. I am doing the thing that I'm saying I'm going to do in a controlled situation. I'm not in a club. There's not going to be outsiders coming in. Everybody else there is paying for the class, so they're not going to flip the table over and storm out or anything like that if they don't like something I say. And so I think giving people the opportunity in front of a friendly audience to try stuff out and have the audience go, this worked, this resonated, this felt comfortable. Maybe you can adjust your performance in this way or that way. And the other thing that was great about it for me, and this is always a problem I've had since I was younger, was I was like, oh, I'm funnier than everybody here, So that was encouraging.
All right. I
Thank
know
you,
it's time
Sean.
for, thank you, Shamala. I know it's time for us to wrap up, but one person did request, well, I know more than one person requested this. Do you remember anything from your rap battle that you could give us as we close?
Let me think for a second. I mean, again, this is 30 years ago, so the girl's name was Martina de la Cruz. And so I sort of, this is going to be so embarrassing, but
Friendly audience.
right. I'm just experimenting. Martina, you're the queen of the lame rhyme. You tried to break on my name. I'm shocked and amazed, dazed and confused, but not amused. So check it out now. It's game time. So step off because you're soft, and I don't mean to judge you, but I'm lost now.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
Conroy, everyone.
Wow, that was awesome.
Thank you for that. I'm going to turn it over to Rita, who's going to wrap us up here.